Hello, okay, welcome to my channel where I talk mostly about watercolour. Now in today's video I'm going to talk about these two paintings that I did. I didn't tape them off, but I plan to crop them afterwards. Maybe something like this and something like this, or I also have a rectangular frame. I did do some other paintings before I did these, and I'm just going to get those up on the screen now. Okay, so I did this one yesterday, and this is a wet and wet technique, and this is what I was using as an example for the paintings I'm going to do in this demonstration. And again, I didn't tape the edges of this painting. I like to be quite free and then crop the painting afterwards sometimes. Okay, and I did another one as well. And in this one I actually added a bit of neo colour pastel in the centre. This one's not quite finished, but I'm going to get back to that, I think, another day. Okay, so I've got a block of paper here, and I've got here Archer's fine grain cold pressed paper. I don't think I pronounced that correctly, even though I've been using this paper for many years. But anyway, let's get straight into the painting. I need to get my colours ready. Okay, so the colours I've got are these. I've got a phthalo blue. I've also got a cerulean blue. I'm not sure if I'll definitely use that one. I've got burnt sienna, Paynes grey and French ultramarine. And I'm just going to get those ready on a plate because I'm going to be using quite a big brush. Okay, and I'm actually adding a little bit of yellow ochre to that palette as well. Okay, so let's get straight into the painting. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different in this video to my others, and I'm going to make the video a bit longer, and I'm going to be playing it back a bit closer to real time. So I'd be interested in the comments if this is something you like or if you prefer the shorter videos. Okay, so I'm laying down my burnt sienna and my yellow ochre there, and that's made the paper wet. I didn't put water down first. But like I said, this is a wet and wet technique, so I will be working all the time I work. The paper will be wet or slightly wet, and the important thing to do is to make sure that when you're adding paint to the wet and wet painting, that the paint you're adding isn't wetter than the paint that's on the page, because if it is, then you get blooms and the paint starts to move in a sort of slightly uncontrolled way. So that's probably my biggest tip for doing a wet and wet painting if you don't want blooms. Okay, so I decided to make this painting a little bit lighter than my example painting, and I've added the phthalo blue to some Paynes grey there. And I'm also being aware that the paint is going to dry a lot lighter than it looks when it's wet, so that's another thing to take into consideration, because I'm not going to want to have to add paint on top of the paint once it's dry. So I'm going in there again with the Paynes grey and the phthalo blue. I'm using quite bright colours, but I do want to keep the colours quite neutral as well. So for example, at the top where I put the burnt sienna down, I also put some cerulean blue on top of that, and that, because those are sort of opposite colours on the colour wheel more or less, that makes a more neutral colour, and I will be doing that all along with this painting. I'll be laying other colours on top of the brighter colours just to make the overall painting more neutral. Now I did feel like I wanted some green in this painting, so I'm putting some green down there at the bottom, but again I will be going over that colour with other colours because it's quite bright at the moment. Okay, so the paper is still wet and I'm continuing to put the paint down, and I am using my knife as well to make fine lines in the surface of this painting. I'm just going to put the music up for a bit and then I'll jump it in again in a bit. Okay, so I'm just taking the paper off the pad there because it's wet, so I'm getting some sort of creases in the paper, and I don't want that to affect how the paint is going on, and that will just make it easier to move the paper around and stop that happening. And I'm putting some really dark paint on now because this paint is going to dry a lot lighter than it looks when it's wet, and even though I want the overall painting to be lighter than my previous painting that I did yesterday, I do need to remember that it's going to dry quite a bit lighter. Okay, I'll put the music up again for a bit. Okay, so I'm starting to feel pretty happy with this painting, and I was trying to decide whether to add a little bit of ultramarine blue down in the corner just as a kind of highlight and to make the painting look a bit more interesting. But my paint is starting to dry now, and I just did a test there on the side to make sure that that paint is going to go down okay, and I think it's going to be fine. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I don't have much water at all on my brush, but that I've got a nice amount of paint. Like I said, if the paint was too wet, if the paintbrush was too wet, then I'd get a bloom, and I really want to avoid that. So I'm doing this quite carefully and quite quickly, and I'm not going to sort of mess around with it too much. And I'm going to do the same thing at the top with the burnt sienna, and I'm making sure that I do this quite quickly and that my paintbrush isn't too wet but has enough of that colour on it, because the paper is still wet, but it's, like I said, it's getting drier, and what you don't want to do is end up putting wet paint on top of dry paint, because then it wouldn't blend with the paint that's already down, and that's not the effect that I want with this painting. But I'm starting to feel really happy with this now. There's an area here where I feel like I'm getting quite a lot of feathering, and I'm actually using a silicone tool to just push that paint around a bit to get rid of that feathering effect. I don't want to go in with a brush because that could really end up possibly removing some of that paint, and that's not what I want to do. So that's just a little trick you can use if you just want to kind of manipulate the paint a little bit. You can just use a silicone tool. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with how this painting is turning out now. I'm just checking the composition, and there is a bit of dry paint there which I'm not so sure about, but I really think that what I need to do is just let this painting dry and then see where we are afterwards once it's dry, and just get a bit of time and space from it. I'm moving the paper like that because that can help it dry a bit more evenly, but more or less I can just leave it to dry. Okay, so it's pretty much dry now, and I think I'd probably crop it in a square. Just looking and comparing it with the painting I did before, I like the way that this painting moves up a bit more towards the top. So I think for the second one I'm going to try and pull that sort of landmass shape up a bit. But anyway, let's get on to the next one, and I think for this one I'll put the music up a bit more, and then I'll jump in again at the very end. so for this area I actually mixed the Paynes grey with a bit of the Cobalt blue, and I was really putting it on quite dark because it was drying lighter, and I'm just trying to sort of get a bit more of an interesting kind of upward shape there. But the painting is really sort of starting to look finished. I'm just blending a little bit at the bottom there, but I decided to leave this painting where it was. I was just checking the composition there with one of my mats. But like I said, I'm just going to let this painting dry, and then let's see where we are. Okay, so I've got my finished paintings here and I'm really happy with how they've turned out. I think they could be cropped in a square frame or in a rectangular frame. I'll probably take a bit of space and time between me and these paintings to decide what to do, but I will be mounting them on a wooden panel and then framing them without glass, so I might try and make a video about that, so stay tuned if that's something that you think would be interesting. And I really hope you've enjoyed this demonstration, and if you did, then please hit like, and if you'd like to see similar videos in the future, then please subscribe to my channel. Okay, thank you, bye.